So, welcome everyone. I'm Zenzi Sewa, and I'm doing my podcast today with Malumire Logan, who I don't want to explain what she does because she does multiple things in her career. But what I'm asking her to explain or share with us today is what spiritual activities, spiritual genres she uses in her life to help her to get through those difficulties, those challenges, as we all have to face. And I know there are multiple different things, and we're living in a time now where we're opening up and we need to share those things because we're all different. As I was saying to Malumire before we started, that we all can't eat pasta. And so there are many different things that we should not be afraid to use, because as long as we're coming from the light, and use them to help raise our conscious level, our consciousness, and to get us through our daily life. And there are many things. So without much ado, let me then introduce you to Malumire Logan.
Thank you so much, Zenzi, for having me. Yes, as you mentioned, I do many things, both professionally and in my spiritual practice, as it turns out. Given my neurodivergence, I've never been someone who has ever been able to only do one thing or have interest in one thing. And so professionally, I have for many years been in leadership positions in strategy and operations. I'm also an adjunct professor at a university teaching leadership and career navigation. But I'm also a small business owner in the spiritual industry, where I've created tarot decks. I'm a certified Reiki master, and a whole host of other things. I'm all about self-healing in terms of empowerment, empowering ourselves. And, as you mentioned, there are so many modalities out there. There are so many ways of existing and living life and even connecting spiritually. And for me, spirituality, when it really comes down to it, it's all about connection to that which is beyond self. Connection to that which is beyond self. And there are so many ways of doing that.
Correct. Because I myself, I'm a spiritualist coach, and very much aware that there's so many things, and I'm encouraging people to talk about what they're using, so that people can see what there is, how it works, and maybe something they can reach out themselves to use to help them through their life and difficulties. I say difficulties, but challenges, because we all have challenges in life. So you do a number of things, but so tell us a bit of those spiritual activities that you do, and maybe challenges that you've had in your life and how you've used them.
Well, Zenzi, we don't have enough time to talk about the challenges that I have experienced in life. but I will say I so firmly believe in the ability for every single person, no matter what their belief system, no matter what their background, no matter whether they have religious beliefs or no religious beliefs, regardless of what people believe or what they're about, I really firmly believe that there is spiritual practice available for every single person. I believe that with every fiber of my being. And I know because I have existed along quite a bit of that spectrum myself throughout my life. And, to put things in a bit of a nutshell and not to diminish anything or to diminish anyone else's experience, but I am a survivor from a deeply abusive upbringing. And I also, things were socioeconomically quite a struggle in the early years as well. And then when we start layering on intersecting identities, I'm an ambiguously racialized woman. I have multiple neurodivergence, currently living with physical disability. Once you start adding on these identities, it just, it compounds some of that complexity. And yet through that, through all of this, it has been spiritual connection, spiritual practice that enabled me to get through all of that, not only to survive it, but also to be in a place of pursuing genuine healing and thriving. And so there are a whole host of different kinds of spiritual practices that I have now. But, I think what's almost more, enlightening for people to be aware of is that, I haven't always done the exact same spiritual practices throughout my life, right? I was a spiritually aware, very young child. But, as the lack of safety in my upbringing made it more dangerous, frankly, to be spiritually aware, I found other ways of connecting spiritually, which enabled me to survive into adulthood.
Okay, so can you just briefly maybe tell us about one instance in your life that you were facing and what you used to overcome that challenge?
Sure. So, I mean, there's so many examples I could choose from, but let me, you know what? Let me, I can share a couple of examples that have kinds of different modalities, shall we say. So, one was a more personal experience where I'd say, this was over 20 years ago. I was working in frontline customer service, and I was living below the poverty line, and I was working usually about 4 jobs to make ends meet. And I was at one of the jobs, which was overnight at a fast food restaurant. And I was leaning out. It was in the lull between the overnight rushes, and I was leaning out the drive-through window. We'd already finished all the cleaning, all the prep. And so I was finally, it was a few hours into the shift, and I was finally just catching my breath. And it was, far more of a break to kind of rest and get some fresh air out of the drive-through window than to go sit in the back room, which was windowless. So, so I was leaning out this drive-through window, and I think it was about this time of year, maybe a little bit earlier. And so it was still mild out, and it was a full moon. And at the time, I didn't even pay any attention. I didn't really have awareness of the moon cycles, but it was a full moon because I remember, leaning out, watching these trucks driving down the main highway and seeing how the moon just shone this, silvery kind of reflective pale light over the field. And I connected. The moment was tangible, right? Because here I was thinking, how am I going to make ends meet? Is this all that I'm going to be able to do with life, is just constantly be stressed about, will I ever, am I going to be able to keep paying rent? Is this what it is? Is this just all that there is for me?
Yeah.
And I still had so much unresolved trauma. At that point, I had not yet actually recognized a lot of my upbringing. It was just, I had survived it. I had moved out, and now I was in a place of, is this all there is? And in that moment where I was thinking, is this all there is? I felt this tangible, like I could almost reach out and touch it. This felt sense of, no, my love, there's so much more. There's more that you're going to experience. There's more you're going to realize. You're going to feel more deeply. You're going to be more deeply ever yourself. There was just this, I couldn't even explain it, because how would I know that? How would I feel any of that? And it's almost like I could just reach out and touch it. But then the moment passed, and then I thought, well, you know what? I don't know how I'm going to achieve that, but I've felt it now. I've felt it. I know now what it feels like to feel that level of connection, that level of purpose, that inner power. So I can have it because I felt it, and I don't know what this looks like, but I'm going to find it. And that moment was crucial because it lit up in me what I believe is a spiritual practice of seeking, of looking, right? Because and I don't even think we need to think about it in such, for people who are a little less woo, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? For people even who are less woo, it's also just about noticing, right? Because sometimes in life we get so just into the routine. We're just doing the
Caught
thing. We're not paying attention. We're missing other things.
Caught up with life.
Right. And the thing is that neurologically, we actually have so much more capacity to notice the things that we're not noticing that perhaps are opportunities for us, right? Where there's more possibility. And so that moment sparked in me that moment of that practice of, oh, there can be more. There is more possibility. I need to open myself up to more possibility. And that has been a crucial practice for me since that time.
Do you find that at that time when you are asking that question, is that it? Is that all life? And then you had that sense that you said you can almost touch it. I know with myself, and I don't know if it's with you, it's like a voice from within and yet a voice from without.
Yes, that's so well said.
In, but it's out. And it's very strange. And it was something like that. Yeah. It's I can't say it's weird. It's your higher self talking to you, and it's at that time when you feel most vulnerable, when you feel so desperate and you're searching, and then it sparks up.
Or even just a moment of, it's like in that moment, I allowed myself to be genuinely open because I was just so taken in by the beauty. Like the moon was beautiful. And, I mean, my surroundings were otherwise pretty boring. It's like parking lot, drive through, parking lot, highway. The surroundings were otherwise, not especially, captivating. But this moon, the way that like the light was just shining down, and it's like it just allowed me in that moment to set aside the mundane and the stressful and to just be open. And in that openness, there already was connection.
What from that moment on, what was your path towards connecting to a particular spiritual practice or practices?
It was a winding one. It was a deeply winding route. And I mean, even to this day, my practice, I think the best way to describe it is syncretism, which is the idea of you don't actually have one set path. You are taking bits and pieces that resonate with you. And it's not in a disrespectful way, but rather in a way that you are aligning what is resonant with deep respect. But, so for example, right now, and I'll get back a bit to the journey that took place, because religiously, I had been raised with a particular religion. And at that point, I still adhered to that religion. And, and that's okay. And I have nothing against religion in general, nor with that religion. It's just that expression of religiosity, of spirituality wasn't quite right for me. And it took a few years. It took some deconstruction. It took my continuing to work on myself and doing the hard emotional work. It also took my going to counseling and beginning to uncover and work through some of those pieces from my past to get to a point where I am now, which is that I have blended pieces of practice that are related to part of my heritage, which includes a lot of ancestral respect and veneration, and as well as more common divination tools like tarot. I absolutely love tarot. It's a long-term committed relationship, me and the tarot. But also, pieces like meditation. And there's so many different kinds of meditation that people can do. As I mentioned, I'm a Reiki master as well. And I also have a lot of appreciation for some of the Western mystery traditions as it relates to the Tree of Life and the Kabbalah, because I really love the idea of, I like to understand the systems and structures at play. And because of my Reiki training, because it's quite rigorous training, and there's a lineage to become a Reiki master. And so I learned to work with the 7 chakra system. Of course, there are many different chakra systems, but that's the one that I learned. That's the one that my training was focused on. But then when I started learning about the Tree of Life and how that actually also applies to the body, I was like, wow, what an opportunity to look at how these two systems, because they both apply to the body, how can we look at how that interrelates? And so I also work a lot with that. And I mean, I could go on there. I have so many different spiritual practices, but to me, it's beautiful because they all work and play together while I maintain the respect and appreciation for the roots of where each one comes from.
Good. I like the way you realize that with the Tree of Life of Kabbalah, which I'm also a student of, and Reiki, you find that they're similar with all your practices, because I know that of myself, that you find they kind of overlap in certain places, and then you realize, oh. And I suppose going back to when you said the way you were brought up in the conventional way, and then you had to go through what I understood was like a guilt, knowing that, well, this was the conventional way, this is where I want to go, this is where I feel that I belong, but because of the convention and things around you, do you find that you're struggling with guilt, having to part and find your own way that wasn't conventional, so to speak?
Initially, yes. Initially, it was when I was starting to truly question what my beliefs really were. Because the thing is, I knew without a doubt, I believed in a higher power that was good, that there was good. I absolutely knew that I believed that. And the thing is that for me, I had been spiritual since before I actually knew what religion was. And I'd already been connected with a higher power from a deeply young age, right? And so it wasn't until I'd been married for, I think, a couple of years, and I started to, I was just so curious. And I think curiosity is so important. Again, the seeing of other opportunities. And I started reading. I'm a reader. I've always been a reader. I love reading. I started consuming all of the books that I could on various forms of spirituality and religion. And, it was fascinating because as I just consumed dozens and dozens of books, I approached it with the idea that I don't need to assume that everything in this book is correct. I don't need to do that. I can just be curious. I can take in information. I can think about it. I'm an intelligent person. Let's critically work through this. Let's see where the connections are. And it's funny because you mentioned, sometimes there are connections between things. As I did all this reading, I started noticing, wow, it's really fascinating how in beliefs across the globe, there are often some similarities, and, and I don't need to assign any meaning or judgment to that. I just find it fascinating. But, I would say it was around, I want to say, I may be getting the years wrong, maybe 2013, 2014, where I did start feeling a bit guilty about, because I was like, I'd always heard like these things are evil, these things are demonic, like the demons are going to come into you. And I was terrified. But I also was fascinated because the systems thinker in me saw a system like tarot and thought, now that is incredibly complex and nuanced, but practical. And it pulls in so much wisdom. It pulls in archetypes. It pulls in the power of story. And don't get me started on the professor side, because I am a big believer in the power of story. And it just pulls in all these things. And so I started to study it. Started with books, because, I couldn't get a tarot deck now because tarot was evil, you see. But and then when I did get a deck, I hid it. I kept it hidden. Honestly, I don't think my husband would have even cared, because I had my meditation space, because now I was coming out in the open about meditating, because which is very cute. It's very cute for me to think back on now. And I had to, rely on the fact that there's scientific, evidence that shows that meditation is good for you. I had to rely on that to alleviate some of the fear that, I felt that I was so afraid of how other people would respond to me. But I think it was really, when I think back, it was really working through all those values and ideas that had been placed on me that were never mine in the first place. And it was working through that. And I eventually did unhide my tarot deck, by the way, but I had it for a while before I told anyone about it, even, my closest friends, my husband. I hid it.
guilt because you feel nobody else does, but I'm sort of like on this road myself and nobody does. And oh, what they can think about me. It's guilt. Yes. We've been made
Yes.
to feel guilty if we're not conventional.
And it was also, I would say that in that era, it was kind of right at this, because tarot now for some people now, they may be thinking, well, that sounds weird. I mean, tarot is so mainstream. It's mainstream now, but at the time you couldn't, it wasn't easy to walk into a major book retailer and have a selection of tarot decks. You couldn't, it wasn't like that, right? This was at a time where it was still seen as, ooh, you're into tarot, right? And all those things were seen as, you know, weird and scary, right? People can say, you know, they can say, oh, I had a, you know, really witchy weekend. And anyone can say that now. You couldn't say that 10 years ago. You could not say that.
No, it was woo-woo. Oh, witchcraft. What are you up to?
And it was seen it, you know, you could say it. And lots of people who, you know, who had practiced for years did, but they were seen as unconventional. They were seen as scary. And so, you know, and so you're exactly right. You know, there was definitely guilt, but there was also a lot of fear. There was so much fear and having to unlearn so much of this stuff is evil.
Yes.
You know, but anyway, yes, it's been quite a journey.
I myself can resonate with that because it took me many years. I knew my spirituality from young as well and going through it, but it's taken me many years to actually come out and say, I'm a spiritualist coach. And yet I'll speak it all the time. And when I'm using it all the time, I'm speaking to people, guiding people, but actually to come out now, I can say I'm a spiritualist coach because times have changed.
Yes.
The world has changed and people are recognizing spirituality and are recognizing that higher power. You were saying before that in your neurodivergence and different things going on, how has that helped you to overcome challenges in that field as well?
Yes, that's a great question. So I have two neurodivergences, one of which is Tourette syndrome, and the other is autism. And you know, I was late diagnosed with both. And usually, so with autism, it's more understandable just because only now is it becoming more commonly understood that autism isn't just for little white boys.
No.
Right. But for years in the scientific field, that was the belief, that was the understanding. Right. And so that diagnosis was more recent. But the Tourette diagnosis, that one was a direct result of my unsafe living situation growing up, because it is very obvious. It is almost always noticed in childhood because of just how noticeable it is. So for people who aren't aware, Tourette syndrome means that you have both motor, like physical, and vocal tics. So you're doing movements and making sounds that are noticeable, that are different. So for example, you know, like these days, and especially because I had to learn how to do a lot of masking these days, I am somewhat masking some of it, but I'm also not. So for example, I may be, you know, you may notice that I'm blinking my eyes a lot or making strange faces that don't seem to relate to what I'm talking about. You also may notice that I'm clearing my throat a lot or making another sound. And that's, you know, these are just some examples, but it was really obvious when I was a kid, but it wasn't caught. However, I think that, you know, I mean, I have gratitude for so many things. And I'm not going to minimize going through difficult things by saying, oh, there's a silver lining, because I think that it's very easy to get into toxic positivity territory there. But what I will say is that despite all the things that we cannot control, what we can control is how we respond, how we choose to respond, how we choose to take the resources and the information that's in front of us and work with it. And so my neurology, I think actually helped when it comes to the deconstruction that I went through when I was kind of exploring new spirituality, because despite the fact that I had been raised, you know, in a particular, this is the religion, this is what we believe, and there's no moving from that, because so one of the realities of neurodivergence, just to get a little bit into some very light science because it'll help, is the lack of gating. So the meaning of this is that someone who is neurotypical, if they're, let's say a neurotypical person does have gating in the brain. So this means that, let's say I'm neurodivergent, I'm standing in front of a field, and I'm standing next to a neurotypical friend, and there are heirloom sheep. There are 10 heirloom sheep in the field. I don't know, they have specially shaped heads or something. And then there are 90 other more regular sheep. My neurotypical friend will probably just notice the 10 heirloom sheep. They won't notice the other sheep. Whereas for me, I won't be able to not notice all of the sheep. I will be looking at all of the sheep and all of the details on all of the sheep at the same time. So I think that this was actually beneficial when it came to exploring spirituality, because instead of only honing into things that created confirmation bias of what I already believed, I was simply, set up to be more open. I think that everyone can still be curious, even if you are neurotypical. I think you absolutely can still be naturally curious or learned curious. You can build it as a skill. You can teach yourself to notice more. But I think it helped also that, so something that's very, a very common observation people tend to make about people who are autistic is that sometimes we are very unconventional, or we just say the thing that we're thinking, or we just do the thing, even if it may not be seen as socially acceptable. Now, a lot of us are highly masked, and I am highly masked because I went so many years not recognizing, not knowing that I was autistic. But there was always that underlying sense of, well, even if it's not conventional, if this is the thing that I think I should be doing, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
I'm just going to do it. And so that helped, right? That helped me.
With your spirituality.
Yes, it did.
That pushed you along the road. And how have you used it with, to help you handling your neurodivergence?
Spirituality?
Yeah. How have you used it?
I wouldn't say that I've done anything to try to manage or work with my neurodivergence per se. I think the only thing that I've been trying to work on is to do less masking. And it's really hard to learn how to unmask in some ways, because in some ways, engaging with other people, communicating with other people, everybody's always masking a bit, right? Because that's just how, we're social creatures, and we want to be context appropriate. And so there's always some level of that amongst everyone, no matter what.
Yeah.
But But for autistic masking, it's a whole other level, because you are constantly questioning, is this appropriate? Am I being normal? Am I coming across as normal? Meanwhile, you're trying to, it's almost like you're working through like a checklist of things that you have to do because these are considered acceptable. But I will say that something I've been doing recently that is connected both, I believe, to partly it's connected to my trauma and to my neurodivergence and to my spiritual practice. I think it's a great example. Every day in my spiritual meditation. So I think there's different types of meditation, right? So we can do just breathing meditation, concentrative meditation, or contemplative meditation, but then there's also spiritual meditation. And so every day in my spiritual meditation, I have been focusing intention on and asking for to be reconnected with my whole self, right? So from a psychological perspective, we, and in internal family systems perspective, now not a psychologist, but for folks who are interested, it's very interesting to look into. There are different parts of ourselves that have experienced different things. And it's important to integrate all of those selves, those parts, into the present moment, because we just end up making better decisions. And so, what I am looking to do is to integrate all parts of myself so that I'm not compartmentalizing myself you know, like we all, you know, people talk about how bad it is when there are bureaucratic silos. Well, we're all doing those bureaucratic silos within ourselves,
yes,
right?
yeah, and probably your spirituality is helping you to see and helping you to identify and to have that strength to know how to manage and what things, as you say, you're not you're departmentalizing, but also the masking, handling your masking, what you feel you can let go, what you feel you can't let go. And do you think your spirituality is giving you the strength to identify and help you with that?
I would say I've always been a deeply strong person. I'm extremely feisty. That's why I'm still here, right? That's why I made it past the age of 7. I am deeply determined, and I am undaunted, right? I would say some of that is my spirituality. I think another part of it is just my personality that I can't necessarily attribute to personality. But what I will say is that the spiritual work and focus that I'm doing on integrating my full self, that integration I feel is really important, because the more whole and integrated I am, the fewer parts of me that are off here in the trauma time or off here being worried about what people think, the more aligned and harmonized I am within spiritually and, you know, psychologically, then the less that I am worried about trying to mask, because I know that just, you know, that I simply am, and I have what it takes to navigate these situations.
That's it. It makes you realize that I am that I am, and I am enough.
Yes.
Not to worry about those things that you feel are that, you know, not everybody has, and you may be different. It makes you feel I am that I am, and I am enough. Now, you also said that you were a Reiki master.
Yes.
How do you use your Reiki in your present life and situations?
So I initially started learning Reiki. We have fuzzy little ones. We don't have any human children, but we have fuzzy little ones. And we had these 2 cats who were sisters. And one of them, unfortunately, had a sudden kidney failure one year and passed away very suddenly. It was deeply, deeply upsetting. But then, you know, even through our own grief, then I was worried, oh no, what about the other cat? She's never not had her sister. Like, what's she going to do? And so I was trying to explore, like, are there spiritual practices? Is there any energy work? And I was already doing some energy work, but I thought, no, I want a structured source of energy work that I can use to comfort her and help her, because she's going to grieve too. And so I started learning Reiki. And then she got very bossy and started demanding it. She started demanding, this cat was demanding Reiki every day. And she would come up to me and she'd be meowing and meowing, and she wouldn't stop until I gave her the Reiki, and then she would happily trot away and go to sleep. So I kept pursuing it, but then I was also finding, because part of the certification process through the Canadian Reiki Association, which is what I'm affiliated with, so part of that certification for the Canadian Reiki Association, which I'm affiliated with, is that you need to do a set number of Reiki services on a large number of people, right? And yes. And so I started, you know, providing people who requested with these services, and it was amazing to see the changes that people were experiencing, right? Like people who had carried some emotional baggage for years, and it was affecting them, right? Affecting their relationships, affecting their lives, suddenly saying, oh my goodness, like this, like it's like something unleashed, released, something unleashed, and it's not bothering me anymore, right? And so people were having these incredible experiences, and so I just kept pursuing learning more, through Reiki. These days, I do provide Reiki to all of our pets because, again, the animals are obsessed with it. Okay, they just love it. They're like, "Give me the sparkly light." So I now have a Chihuahua and 2 cats, and they all get the Reiki because what they ask for is what they get. Yeah. And then I also do Reiki on myself. I'll set it up as I love setting up Reiki grids for myself when I'm going to sleep to help myself have a really peaceful, restorative sleep. So I'm doing that. These days, I don't offer Reiki services at this time just because I'm going through a whole medical thing right now, and
it's taking a lot of energy from you.
And when you're doing services for people, you want to be in a good place of energy.
Yeah, now, we spoke about Reiki, but can you just explain what Reiki is? Because there'll be some people are saying, what is Reiki?
Yeah, absolutely. So Reiki is a particular form of energy work. It originated in Japan, and it's similar to, for folks who are familiar with martial arts, there's a lineage that you have where, you learn from a teacher, and then so there's a teacher who is a student, and then that student becomes a teacher, and then someone learns from that teacher, and so on and so forth. So there's a set lineage. Reiki is the same. And so you should always have a clear lineage. And it works, and the form of Reiki that I learned, because there are different forms of Reiki, just like anything else, right? There are different philosophies of doing things. And so the type that I learned works with the 7 chakra system. And the idea is that it is Reiki energy. It is healing energy that it's like you're working as a mechanism that directs that energy. You connect with the Reiki energy as the Reiki practitioner, and then you use your hands to direct it into animals or people who request the Reiki energy. Now, Reiki energy is pure love, and so you can't, just like you cannot force love on anyone, you cannot, you can't force a Reiki energy on anyone who doesn't need it, who doesn't want it. No. And also the Reiki energy cannot, you can't get too much of it because what isn't needed, it's almost like it's water soluble. The idea of water soluble vitamins, it kind of flows out. And so it's a lovely gentle tool to work with. And I've worked with all sorts of clients, dealing with all sorts of different things and having all sorts of different beliefs. Like, it doesn't matter what your beliefs are, as a client, you can receive Reiki energy. I will say it always feels different when you're doing Reiki on yourself versus if you're receiving it from somebody else. Like, I can do it for myself, but it doesn't have the same,
effectively, somebody else is doing it to you, sending energy to you. Yeah,
exactly. When I have been receiving Reiki energy, for me, it's like tingly and shiny, and there's lots of light. When I'm doing it on myself, I think it's because it has to come through you to go through you, so you're not getting the same sensation.
So, Malumire, all right, you're a Reiki master, you do that, but you also said you use the tarot cards.
Yes.
How do you use that to help you through? Because I use tarot cards as well.
Yes. You know what? I love the tarot for so many reasons. But, one of the reasons that I really enjoyed is that, again, it can be used regardless of what your own beliefs are. And regardless of what your purpose is, right? So some people use tarot in a predictive way. So, they want to look at how are things going to turn out down the road. And you can totally do that. What I find is, some of the more empowering ways to use a tarot is either a self-reflection. So let's say you have a journaling practice, or you're trying to get into journaling. Sometimes, free writing is a great thing to do, right? Where you just sit down and you start writing away, you're dictating away, however you journal. But sometimes it's really helpful to have a prompt or to have something to kind of respond to, or to have, you know, for the tarot to kind of reflect back at you, here's something about yourself that you may want to pay more attention to. So it's simple, right? You shuffle your decks and you pull out a card, and whether or not you know what the meaning is, you don't even have to. You can look at they usually come with a little white book or a guidebook. You can look at that, or you can just react to the picture on the card. It's a picture, right? It's a picture. And what are the things you're noticing, right? What is standing out to you? How does it make you feel? Journal about that, right? And it's also great for if you're trying to better understand a situation or yourself. Now, one thing I will say that I always am very clear with people is don't go where you're not invited. So for example, you know, you don't want to be pulling cards to be like, what is this person thinking? Okay. First of all, that's going where you're not invited. Secondly,
it's none of your business what the person is thinking about you or anything else.
Exactly. And frankly, it's not empowering. Like, how does it actually help you knowing what someone else is thinking or doing? Like, that's them. You got to focus on you. So instead, like, you can look at the dynamics in a relationship, but you know, it's more about what matters to me. What are my values? What do I need to look at in this situation? What will empower me? What are the actions that I can take? Right. So it's really great for getting clarity on what's important to you and how you can empower yourself to achieve the outcomes that you actually want. Right. Because sometimes we think we know what we want, and the tarot can be very good at being very forthright with us on, is that really what you want?
Very much so. I found that over the years, and even quite recently, when you want something and you're thinking, right, if I'm going to do this, and what will the outcome be? And then you find, well, what you might be doing is right, but the outcome is not going to be this, because you need to take your time, or you need to just and sometimes you have to tell your ego to get out of the way.
Yes. And, you know, and there's something to be said for recognizing that, you know, even if you're not getting the cards that are suggesting the outcome that you want per se, that doesn't have to mean that anyone freaks out. It's just information. It's just information. And so even in predictive readings, now I love, you know, I think that there's absolutely a place for predictive readings. What I always suggest to people though is be careful about how you're asking questions, right? Not just, will this happen? Because, okay, well, where does that leave you? Right? Like what does that even mean? So, right, it's about looking at, you know, assuming that everything is continuing on the current path. What are the things that I need to be aware of? Like, what are the various things at play? And again, come back to, you know, what are the things that I really want? How can I achieve those things? Like, what are the things, like, let's say this is the outcome that I really want. What are the actions I can take to achieve that? And if there are any obstacles that look like they're coming up, what do I need to understand about those obstacles and myself, so that I can empower myself to figure out, are these things I need to avoid? Is this still what I want to do? And how can I navigate in a way that is of best benefit for myself and the broader world?
I think what you said there, and I believe very much what you said there, is not just when you're doing tarot cards or anything, but even in meditation, even when you're in silence. And what you have exactly said are the things we should be saying, because it is about guidance. It is about not just, I want this, I want that, but it says, I want this, how do I go about it? Because the way we think we should, as you rightly say, is probably not the way that's going to produce the results that we want and desire. And so it's very important how we ask, and you're so right. It is the way we ask things. Malumire, well, you've said so much. We've talked so much. You've spoken about your Reiki, your cards, the tree of life, and all the things that you've had to use in your life. Is there any last thing you want to say that you may want to give to our audience, to those who are looking, who are searching spiritually?
Yes. What I would say is that you already have all the resources and abilities within you to find the connections that help you to become more connected with yourself, more connected with the world, to be curious, to notice the opportunities that are there that will support you and that will create a beautiful future for you. You do, and you will find these things.
Thank you so much. And that's true. Everything begins within us. We already have the power. It's just that we've forgotten. We've gone to sleep, and now everything is waking up in the present time we're living. And so many of us are now speaking to encourage all of you to find that inner power within you so that you can use whatever tools there are. And there are many tools. And please continue watching my podcast, because this is what it's all about, asking people what tools they use to overcome to their challenges in their life, how they go through. The Creator gave us everything. Life has its challenges, and there will always be challenges, but there are always tools to help us through those challenges so it can make life a little bit easier. So thank you once again for tuning in. Malumire, thank you so much for being on this podcast and sharing your experiences, sharing the tools you use, and good luck for the future.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming. Bye for now. Bye, everyone.